My name is Emily. I'm the managing editor of The Common. I have been here for 7 years. This is The Common. The Common has been here for about 12 years, I think. We also have in the audience Jen, our editor-in-chief. We have all our wonderful interns who are almost our entire staff, some volunteer readers who help us read submissions, so I want to thank them especially for coming today. And also thank especially the Pioneer Valley Workers Center for co-sponsoring this event. Ari and Patricia are with us. The Pioneer Valley Workers Center helps advocate for and organize the local workers, farm workers, restaurant workers, low-wage workers. So we're really glad they could be with us today to talk about farm work from their perspective in the local area. A little bit about this portfolio that's in this issue. I've been toying with doing something farm-related for the issue for many years because I grew up on a very small dairy farm. My parents farm about 20 miles from here. The only farm workers on that farm were my parents and my sisters and I, but we were put to work. And it made me think a lot about how hard farm work is, how long and difficult the hours are, the physical toll it takes on your body. But also, it's something you do with your family, and that can make it really beautiful. Doing it with your community can make it beautiful, and that's something that I've really noticed in a lot of the work that we published in this issue. There's a beauty in working the land, working with the animals, being part of something larger, and I think there's a lot of that in this issue. But the thing that really brought this portfolio together is that I went to a writing conference, and I went to a panel of farm worker writers that Miguel organized. And it was really eye-opening for me. It was sort of like seeing the other side of the coin, the other side of farm work that I hadn't experienced because I had just come from a small family farm, but that is happening all around us in the Valley and especially in places like California and Texas and the Midwest. Our area loves local food. We love supporting local farms. We go to the farmers market, but we don't always see the laborers who are there picking the food every day. They're not as much visible in this area. So we're really hoping that we can bring some more visibility to their stories, lift up their voices. Miguel and I have been talking about doing this for years. We finally put the call out last summer. We were co-editing the pieces this spring, and I'm just so glad that we're finally here. It's finally here. We'll do some readings. I have a few questions for our guests, and then we'll do some of your questions if you have questions. We're going to try to keep it all under an hour. Keep refueling with chips and wine and whatever you need. And please, stay after to have conversation and more food and wine and stuff. I just want to, before we start, I wanted to ask Patricia Lopez from the Pioneer Valley Workers Center to come and speak and talk a little bit about the Pioneer Valley Workers Center, what they do, and her own experiences. And she speaks Spanish, so she'll have her translator, Carla, with her.
Hola, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Patricia López.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Lopez. You guys hear me okay? Yeah.
Yo soy trabajadora del campo y también soy voluntaria del Centro Obrero.
I work at the farm and I am also a volunteer at the center.
El trabajo del Centro Obrero es ayudarnos a nosotros, los trabajadores del campo, a saber sobre nuestros derechos.
The center has helped us to know our rights at the field.
Educarnos para también saber cómo defendernos de muchas personas que quieren tratarnos mal en una finca o explotarnos más de la cuenta.
To get educated and to know how to defend ourselves when people are trying to mistreat us at the work field.
Gracias al Centro Obrero yo me he dado cuenta que yo también puedo alzar mi voz y defenderme en los files donde yo trabajo.
Thanks to the center, I've learned that I can defend myself by raising my voice and defend myself at the workplace.
El Centro Obrero ha sido una gran ayuda para nosotros, la comunidad de hispanos y indocumentados que estamos en esta región de Massachusetts.
The center has been of great help for the people that are not documented and the people that work here in Massachusetts.
El Centro Obrero también nos ayuda a nosotros nos dan despensas, los ayudan también en el momento que hay veces nos despiden injustificadamente de un trabajo, los ayudan a ir a visitar a los empleadores y preguntarles por qué los han despedido así sin ninguna explicación.
The center also helps us when we get fired without any explanations. They help us to learn why we got fired with no explanation.
Yo he trabajado en los files del lado de acá, de Northampton, de Amherst, en fincas donde muchas veces somos explotados, los tratan mal solo por no saber hablar inglés o los tratan mal solo por el puro hecho de ser hispanos.
I worked in Northampton and Amherst, and I worked in farms where they just mistreat us because we're Hispanic and we don't know how to speak English.
Ahorita el Centro Obrero los quiere ayudar a nosotros, los trabajadores del campo, a tener baños dignos en los files, porque no se nos proporciona muchas veces.
The center wants to help us so like we can have decent bathrooms because we don't get that offered to us.
Y porque como nosotros decimos, hay muchas personas que van a los supermercados a recolectar lo que es las verduras frescas, porque yo sé que les gustan verduras frescas, recién cortadas, pero no saben con el sacrificio que nosotros lo hacemos.
I know that a lot of people like to go to the supermarket and get fresh vegetables and fruits, but they don't know the sacrifice that we have to go through in order for them to receive that nice product.
Porque muchas veces tenemos que trabajar aunque esté lloviendo o aunque la temperatura esté demasiado alta, tenemos que estar trabajando. Lo hacemos muchas veces también por nuestra necesidad para mantener a nuestros hijos.
No matter the weather, whether it's raining or it's too hot outside, we still have to work because we have to support our children.
Y muchas veces, por eso las personas se quieren aprovechar de nosotros y tratarnos mal, porque saben que no podemos ir a otros lugares a buscar trabajo, a algunas compañías, a empresas, porque no nos dan la oportunidad de trabajar en esos lugares.
That's why people take advantage and they mistreat us because they know that we don't have the opportunity to work maybe in a different place, like a factory or in a different place besides where we work.
Pero como les vuelvo a repetir, gracias al Centro Obrero, pues estamos saliendo adelante y gracias a ellos también que lucharon, porque ahora ganamos lo de las licencias, ellos nos ayudaron a trabajar sobre eso.
So thanks to the center, they're helping us fight, and we also got the permit so that we can get driver's license.
Ahora ya podemos llegar a nuestros trabajos sin miedo, que los va a detener el policía, nos quitan el carro y todo eso.
So now we're able to go to work without that fear that if we get stopped by a cop, they're not going to take our car away because we do have our driver's license.
Okay. Y gracias por haber dado este momento para poder haber hablado con ustedes. Te lo agradezco.
Thanks for this time so that I was able to share what I had to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Patricia. Patricia mentioned the Pioneer Valley Workers Center helped pass a new bill where now undocumented workers can get driver's licenses. They're working on a bill now with more protections for farm workers, guaranteed day off a week, guaranteed overtime pay, limit on the number of hours they can work, that kind of thing. So if you are interested in what the Workers Center does, they have some information back at the table where we're selling issues here. You can get involved. They're wonderful people. Great. I'm going to get started. The first person I would like to introduce to read a little is Miguel M. Morales, who is our portfolio co-editor. This portfolio would absolutely not have happened without him. He really put his heart and soul into this issue and constantly reminded me why it was important that we were doing it and why it was important that we got it just right, which in the rush of putting together a magazine, sometimes you can lose sight of that. So, and he also flew here all the way from Kansas City this morning, so long trip. Miguel M. Morales grew up in Texas, working as a migrant and seasonal farm worker. Selected as a finalist for the 2023-2026 Poet Laureate of Kansas, he is a two-time Lambda Literary Fellow and an alum of Vona Voices and the Macondo Writers Workshop. His work appears in several anthologies, including Primera Página, Poetry from the Latino Heartland, Cuentos del Centro, Stories from the Latino Heartland, From Macho to Mariposa, new gay Latino fiction, and The Other F Word, a celebration of the fat and fierce. His work has been published in Duende Journal, Acentos Review, Green Mountains Review, Texas Poetry Review, Hawaii Review, and World Literature Today, among other journals. Miguel is the co-editor of Pulse Pulso, In Remembrance of Orlando, and of Fat and Queer, an anthology of queer and trans bodies and lives, which was named the 2021 Book of the Year by the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. Miguel has earned several awards, including the Society of Professional Journalists First Amendment Award. Thank you so much for being here, Miguel. Do you want to read for us?
I'm so thrilled to be here in this moment with you. These conversations don't happen where I live in Kansas, probably not where other people live, and I'm so happy that Patricia is here to remind us what we're writing for and what we're working for and how we use our art to support workers and our family as well, who are the family of farm workers. And I really want to thank the Common for bringing us all together. I know funding is really limited for colleges and universities, especially for their literary magazines, and the fact that we're here together is a statement on how much they believe in what we're putting out today. So I really am, humbled that they brought us together and presented us with this opportunity to share our voices. So this first piece, you're gonna have to forgive me because these are the first times I'm reading these pieces out loud, so I don't know the rhythm, but I'm gonna try and share it. This first piece is called Half Moon, Part 1. Days into the promise of a new year, resolutions plentiful, blossoming, 7 farm workers were shot and killed harvesting mushrooms in Half Moon Bay, California. Those of us who sprouted from farm work, those of us who sprouted from families whose hands and backs worked the land, waited for news of our farm worker siblings. We waited to hear the empathetic profiles eulogizing our dead and allowing us to mourn with their families and with our farm worker community. We waited for stories offering insight into their humanity, of those they left behind. We waited to learn of their accomplishments and their aspirations. Yet we got bullet points listing their names, ages, perhaps their country of origin, or fragmented descriptions of their relationships. They weren't deemed worthy of the standard mass shooting reporting, just bullet points, bulleted points for these victims, another act of violence. There were no thoughts or prayers from politicians for our farm workers whose labor brought food to our tables and whose lives lifted the community. Those of us who sprouted from farm worker families whose hands have worked the land know that violence has always been part of our story. The continuous violence of the burning sun, of the numbing frost, of dehydration, of carcinogenic pesticides, of wildfires, of sexual assault, of child labor, threats of deportation, poverty, exploitation, dehumanization, sharpened machetes, spades, knives, hoes, shears, and of guns. Guns that killed farm workers from the early days of organizing for fair wages to the mass shootings of the workplace and the violence of today. Our workplace has always been violent, and you've always ignored it. This I wrote in conjunction with my sisters because farm working women are the hardest working people I know, and I had to work with them on this piece. It's called Sisters. I grew up in a farm working family. No, that's not accurate. It's incomplete. I grew up in a family of farm working women. The hands of our sisters, our tias, our cousins, mothers, and abuelas have worked the fields, worked to feed us, worked to raise us, worked to protect and provide for us. I love my mom, but the truth is that my sisters raised me. Farm work would not survive without women, nor would farm worker families. Number 1, Debbie. I don't think anybody knows this in our family, but I learned how to drive while working the fields. At dawn, Tia Lucia, who assigned us our rows, assigned us the youngest ones 2 or 3 rows, and the older kids got more. Reaching the end, we'd turn back and work our way to where the truck was. The truck would sit about 20 feet from where we started. One day, Lucia asked if I knew how to drive, and I said no. She taught me how to drive that short distance, and soon it was my responsibility for a few short moments I could get off my feet and be in the shade. Eventually, I drove us from field to field and then off the farmers' dirt roads to the main road on our way home, and that's how I learned how to drive. Before the farmer could irrigate fields of arid crops, we'd clear them of weeds. He'd pump water directly from the Ogallala aquifer underlying the high plains. The clear, plentiful water flowed through the newly trenched irrigation ditches, and we'd fill our containers with the delicious, yet somehow ice-cold water, satiated as the crops that we tended. Cloudy days usually brought rain, which excited us because we could take a break or maybe even quit for the day. Moments before it rained, we'd feel cool, calming breeze rush across the fields, and its deep, earthy fragrance, petrichor, preceded the rain that usually followed a very long dry spell. Like the water from the aquifer, it refreshed us. Number 2, Melinda. Despite only having 30 minutes to eat lunch, we had the best lunches. Our morning thoughts centered on the burritos with papas or beans or pork or steak or whatever it is that Mom made us early that morning. Lunches were the best part of the day outside of quitting time. We'd elude the assiduous sun by resting in the shade of the truck or in a nearby cornfield. We couldn't take off our shoes because our hot pulsating feet would swell and then we wouldn't be able to get our shoes back on. We resisted the urge to drink too much water because we'd get sick. Besides, I hated the embarrassment of having to relieve myself in the fields. Lots of gossip and storytelling happened in the open, vast fields, birth stories, death stories, and everything in between, family history. I desperately wanted to share stories to be part of the group, but even though I was young, I held secrets, so I just listened. One summer, my cousin, who also worked the fields with us, her dad finally got caught molesting girls. Her life unraveled, and she repeatedly tried to commit suicide. After witnessing the fallout of her life, I didn't dare tell my story. Even when Mom specifically asked if I was molested, I said no. Number 3, Grace. For me, it wasn't the hard work or the heat, it was the humiliation. Riding in the back of trucks as we drove home at the end of the day, I'd see friends I went to school with, and I'd pull down my hat and slide down as far as I could in the back of the truck and pray they didn't see me. We worked back-breaking 60-hour work weeks with only $60. For only $60. Of that, Mom only gave me 3. Once I worked up the courage to say that it wasn't fair, that we should get more. She slapped me across the face with contempt in her eyes. She grabbed the $3 out of my hand and said, "Well, now you get nothing." I wish I could say I'm over it, but an inventory of my life begs to differ. Working the fields taught me to walk through the world with my head down. I know other field workers who have found success. They're confident and they stand up for themselves. They claim their accomplishments with gratitude. Today, younger people ask questions. They've decided they can no longer live an invisible life, ashamed. They've learned that it all starts with story. Story reminds us that we're alike and that we have more in common than our circumstances. I'm learning that story is essential in moving forward and taking our seat at the table, a table where, together, our farm-working hands have harvested the feast.
Is this just on? Okay. It's like, where's the on switch? Thank you so much, Miguel. That was really beautifully read. Thank you. One technical note, there are some more chairs here if anyone does need chairs, but you have to get them yourself. Okay. Next, we're going to hear from Nora. Nora's essay was one of the first we edited for the portfolio, and it just got me so excited for everything else I knew I was going to read and love in the portfolio. There's a nice energy and a nice joy in this piece, which, we found again and again in the farm worker writing. Yeah. Nora Rodriguez Camagna grew up in Texas, Mexico, and California's migrant labor camps and graduated from the University of California, Berkeley. As a child, it was her abuelita Arsenia's storytelling under their backyard cherry tree that kept her connected to family in Mexico and inspired her to become a writer. Her work has been featured at the Bay Area Book Festival and Stories on Stage, Sacramento. She's been a fellow at many juried writer workshops and has studied under Tommy Orange, Karen E. Bender, Anthony Mara, Gabriela Garcia, and Ingrid Rojas Contreras. She teaches creative writing to underserved students through 916 Inc., a Sacramento nonprofit literacy organization. One of her favorite parts of teaching is inspiring students to recognize that their imaginations have no borders. She lives in California with her husband and is a mother of 3 wonderful sons. And she flew all the way here from California to be with us. Thank you, Nora. Go ahead.
Thank you. I guess you can hear me. I'm just going to read my story, but thank you to the comment. I think this is awesome to get farm workers together, but I think Miguel said it best of how important it is to hear different stories and different voices. Boysenberry Girls, June 1978, Central Valley, California. We demanded, we begged, we guilt-tripped our parents for money. We'd reached the age where we cared about our image. We no longer accepted garage sale clothes or Kmart blue light sale items. We wanted the hip-hugging sailor pant flap Chemin fur jeans. We wanted the upside-down U-stitch on the butt dittos. We wanted the iconic Ralph Lauren polo, and we wanted the clunky Connie clogs. We wanted the clothes our American middle school classmates strutted around in. But our parents were frugal. Over a span of 30 years, I had risen from working in the peach, apricot, almond, and walnut orchards to working at the Hunt Wesson tomato cannery, and now they guarded their money like dragons guarding their treasure. With 5 children to raise, they had zero sympathy for our frivolous desires. My sisters and I didn't give up. We sulked, we raged, we cried, we drove our mother crazy while our father worked. One Saturday morning, a solution came to Mom while she washed dishes in the sink. We were lounging on our plastic-covered, tropical flowered couches, having just feasted on Eggo waffles and Lucky Charms. Our tan legs glistened with lotion, and our brown hair fell over our shoulders with streaks of orange from the sun and spray we used to highlight our hair like Farrah Fawcett's. We flipped through Tiger Beat magazine, mascara-caked eyelashes fluttering as we debated which Hardy Boy was cuter. Huercas huevonas, Mom said, with enough anger in her voice to make us look up. You need to work. She shouted at us, still scrubbing with a steel wool sponge. Big blue rollers wobbled in her jet black hair. You have forgotten how you got here. We're in school, I said. I was the bravest sister and defended us against our oppressive parents as needed. Plus, we're too young to work. It's against the law, I added imperiously. I was a know-it-all, too. That's not what Comadre Oralia says. A wicked gleam flickered in Mom's dark brown eyes. We felt fear clamber up our legs, fill our bellies, and latch onto our chests. What was our mother planning? Mom had commiserated with her comadre Oralia Garcia about their ungrateful children over café con leche and pan dulce one Friday morning after they'd sent us off to school. Oralia Garcia's children demanded money too, she told our mother, also named Oralia. In between sips of coffee, Oralia Garcia told Mom that she'd heard from her cousin that the Mueller Berry Farm in Denair, a mere 15 minutes away from our small farm town Houston, needed documented workers to harvest their boysenberries. The previous year, the Mueller farm had lost a third of their workers to La Pinche Migra, and because boysenberries have a short harvest season, rows and rows of berries rotted on the vines. Comadre Oralia says that kids as young as 12 can work in the fields with their parents' permission, Mom crowed. I was 12, Myrna was 13, and Sonia was 14. We escaped to our bedrooms. Maybe she'll forget if we clean up our rooms, we whispered desperately. If we empty our overflowing bathroom trash can. If we hang our laundry on the clotheslines without her nagging us. Like little Mexican Cinderellas, we dashed about cleaning. We showed Mom the perfectly made beds, the laundry drying under the bright sun, the sparkling clean bathroom sink and toilet. She raised her pencil-arched eyebrows and smiled. We sighed with relief. Our mother had wanted this American life for us. She wouldn't betray us and force us to work in the fields like she had. Our parents had been migrant farm workers alongside their parents beginning in the 1950s. They'd followed the crops from March until September, up the Imperial Valley to Fresno, Watsonville, Modesto, and finally to Houston. One scorching summer, our parents met while picking peaches atop tall ladders. They fell in love, covered in peach fuzz, dirt, and sweat, they like to joke. They married when Mom was 17 and Dad was 22. In the next 8 years, they had 4 children and lived in the Empire migrant camps while they worked in California. When Dad landed a job at Hunt Wesson and our maternal abuelita Arsenia gave them money from her house sale in Reynosa, Mexico, our parents bought their first American home. A few years later, they bought a second home. And when my father was promoted to supervisor at Hunt Wesson and my mom started working at the cannery part-time, they bought our current home, their American dream home, a brand new 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom in a development where a peach farm had once stood, where our parents had once worked. That's it. Thank you.
Just sitting here clapping like I don't have the next thing to say. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Nora. Last but not least, we have Julián. Julián has 2 poems in this issue. They both really jumped out at us right away from the submission queue. I think you'll see why when he reads them. Julián David Bañuelos is a Chicano poet and translator from Lubbock, Texas. His poems and translations can be seen in the Cincinnati Review, the Hopkins Review, the Latino Book Review, and many more. His unpublished collection, Las Cancioncitas, was selected as a 2023 National Poetry Series finalist. He's a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop. Welcome, Julián. Thanks for being here.
Let's see what's the likelihood I can get this up. Should work, maybe. Anita. Perfect, maybe. Okay, that'll do. That'll do. All right, before I start, I just want to take a second to look at each and every one of you. Say I'm grateful that you're here. And grateful that I get to share these poems with you. I have the pleasure to have 3 wonderful people here in attendance, my beautiful mother, mi media naranja, and then my suegra. And to Miguel and to everybody in the Common staff, thank you. Having a platform to share art is everything. Having a platform to share stories is everything, because I think our stories at the end of the day are the only thing that we'll have left. So, the first poem I'll read, I'll give you all a little background. Before I left to Iowa, I went and visited my great-grandmother, Manuela Perez, who worked in the fields. And when I told her I was going to Iowa, she had mentioned that she had gone to Iowa as a young girl, as a migrant farm worker. And I don't know if it's true, but I found myself in a class in which a poem by Rafael Alberti was put in front of me, and I needed to write my grandmother's story, or at least a story that I interpreted. Ballad for the One Who Never Went to Iowa, after Rafael Alberti. I noticed the canas sprouting from her scalp. I noticed the sky. I noticed the engine's hum. I noticed my heartbeat and the breeze. Nunca fui a Iowa. My mother tells me I gave her canas, and now I have my own. Mi bisabuela worked Los Campos, says she was once Iowan. Nunca vi Iowa. I noticed the hills, the people populating small towns, roadkill. I noticed county lines. I noticed the tumbleweeds, the flatlands. Nunca entré in Iowa. I left to find the fields, the tomatoes, the beets, and the music. Mi bisabuela worked for the railroads, and now I follow tracks. Nunca fui a Iowa. I noticed the early risers, I noticed the big trucks, the highways, I noticed the canyon, I noticed the solid yellow lines. Nunca vi Iowa. Both mi bisabuelos are gone. I am lucky to have known pain. Here, I am lucky to have found the cardinal perching on the dogwood. Nunca entré in Iowa. I noticed the music fade. I noticed the blur in the rear view. Again, I noticed the sky, the sun, the drift of clouds in pursuit. Nunca fui a Iowa. I am where the music died, came from where it began. I noticed blood in the horizon. I noticed the river. I wanted to swim. Nunca vi Iowa. All right, so this next poem was originally titled La Limpia, which means, the cleaning of the fields. And then it found its way to the weeds. But this was an attempt to reconnect with my family who were part of the migrant workers. And this went back as far as my bisabuela, and then my grandmother, my grandfather, my mom. And then for me, I didn't work in the fields, but I ended up working for a cotton gin manufacturer. And I talked to my grandmother, who we'll hear from. These are persona poems in a way. And the first sonnet, and then the second one is my mom, and then the third one is me. And it has a little epigraph. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. Genesis chapter 3:19. The weeds. 1. In many ways, we knew we had no choice. We woke in time to tell the stars goodnight, returned to broken homes and heard the fights. I hated those fields, but I fell in love with his voice. I sat front row at the Bobby Lewis show every morning. I couldn't sleep at all last night. Hoo-hoo would sing for all of us, shoulder to shoulder, tightly packed cotton bells, rolling to fields that knew our hands so well. Often, I fell to earth before the rain did. 12-year-old tear ducts provided the perfect moisture to keep those rows white. 50 cents per hour. I saw nothing. I said nothing when hoo-hoo cut weeds in my row. 2. Normal girls spent summers cannonballing, dancing to Thriller, idolizing Princess Diana, while the four of us stood hoe in hand, whispering good morning to groggy skies. Cutting weeds wasn't fun, but being with my Thea and her 2 daughters in those fields right off the Slayton Highway meant everything. Those fields made us women. The dashboard slow-cooked our bean burritos just in time for lunch. $5 per hour to learn to pop a squat. At 13, I was being potty trained yet again. Soiled underwear, calloused hands. We spent those summers becoming women. 3. There's no choosing between privilege and work ethic. Panhandle-colored skin. When I grow old, you'll see rows of cotton run above my arched brows. My hands will return to adolescence, but my body will speak. Through aches and pains, I inherited privilege. Through bruised and broken backbones, I learned blistered hands were meant to bleed. Count the calluses after a week's work, and that's your payment. At 15, these hands bent steel, built banjos for cotton gins. We mowed the earth, forgetting that the rain brings winds that carry our bodies like dust. Thank you.
Okay, Miguel, do you want to grab hold of that microphone, make it your own? We'll do a few questions. I seem to have the wobbliest stool. Great. Okay, great. And I will try to save some time for audience questions too. We'll see how long we go, but think of questions. I would love for you all to just tell us a little bit about what role farm work played in your lives or your family's lives, and then how you came to writing after that. Julián, you just told us a little bit. Do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll elaborate a little more. So as I talked about, many generations of farm work, limpiar, piscando los campos. And for me, I didn't really hear about those stories growing up. And then when I found myself in Iowa, that's where the connection started to form. I wrote a collection called Tongue-Tied de Lejos. And it was about home. It was about my own experience with the Spanish and English language. But then it became about the stories of my loved ones and the lessons that were passed down to me. I think Nora and I were talking a little bit about this before, and it was just in Latino culture, it's the work ethic, the work that is put in that isn't seen, that is needed to raise a family. And my grandfather wanted to instill that in me, and the best way he knew how was to learn the land. And for me, it started with cutting yards. And the first time he taught me everything I needed to know, he asked me, he was like, do you want to do it the right way or the half-ass way? And everything in me as a young teenager wanted to say the half-ass way. I wanted to get out of the sun. The hot Texas sun was not doing it for me. But, I didn't say that. I said I wanted to do it the right way. And it was, from the moment the sun rose until it came down, we were just out there, and it was beautiful. And in hindsight, I can say that I learned a lot from it. In the moment, I didn't want to be there. But just finding a way to connect to that rich history that, a lot of times goes undocumented, it's unseen. So I think that's what I'm trying to do with my work.
I grew up with my parents. We'd go back and forth to Mexico, Texas, and California. They had a really strong family unit in northern Mexico, and their goal was to go back there, rebuild a town they had. So I never felt growing up that we were American or we were going to stay here. But what I did feel was a lot of community. And even though all my family were field workers at the beginning, and then they slowly started working in the canneries, making much more money because of unions, I just always saw this, huge work ethic. And, I know the work was brutal and hard, but I think because my family was so connected, there was so much extended family that they found strength in each other. And when I was writing Boysenberry Girls, I thought, I had the same thing with me and my sisters. There was 3 of us. And actually, later on, my youngest sister gets so mad at me that she's not in this story really. My mom was pregnant with her in this story. She's like really jealous. But because we were so connected, we gave each other strength. We never felt alone. We never felt, when we were in schools in the United States, we were like 1 grade apart. We were our own friend group, so we never felt out of place, I guess. And we just had great teachers too. I just can't, I'm teaching right now, and I cannot say enough about teachers, and they're underpaid, and they should get paid more, and we should value them more for what they do, because without teachers, I wouldn't be where I was. They introduced me to books. They actually would come to my parents' home because my parents didn't speak English. They didn't want us to be American. We were going back to Mexico, and but it was the teachers who came into my parents' home and said, no, you know what? They should read more. You should let them play sports. They were trying to get us into this world, and I just, cannot say that enough. But I do know that as we started getting older, we began our Spanish. We began to lose our Spanish and get distance from our family because we were becoming very American, and that's a good thing, I think. But it was sad that we were losing this connection to our parents, and so as Boysenberry Girls says, but my mom was like, these girls, I was in the fields at their age, they're so spoiled. And she made us go back and work, and we did, and it connected us back to them. We worked 4 summers in these boysenberry fields, and it did make us appreciate when we're out there if you read the essay, buy the book, read all our stuff. When we were back out there, there's a line I think that Emily, you said you really liked, where I say, when we were carrying our boysenberry boxes, we carried them like they were a burden, and the other workers looked at us like, because for them it was a lifeline. It was they were working there, but we knew we were working. It was hard, but we knew we had food on the table. We knew our dad and mom were good providers, so we did, and we were documented, which I think is huge. I think it's so. I think my parents were so successful, and we were because we were documented. We never lived with fear, And I know there's so many undocumented, just make them citizens for God's sake, that our society would benefit more. When living without fear, you can become your true self, you can contribute more. I just don't know why that hasn't happened, but anyway, that's on a tangent. But anyway, yeah, so, working in the fields, we connected back to our parents, and we saw what they'd sacrificed for us. I know that probably would have wanted, my mom always did say to us, she would have wanted to be a teacher if she would have been born in the United States. But that couldn't happen for her. And this essay to me is a love letter to my parents, I said before, for everything they did for us.
For me, I always thought I started working in the fields when I was 10 years old. But then Emily said, why don't you send in a picture of you when you were a kid for this panel? And I did, and I looked at my picture and I turned it over and it said, 3rd grade, 1977. And in that picture, I had already been working in the fields for at least 2 years. So I'm like, wait a minute. I've been working in the field since I was in the 2nd grade. And that just freaked me out because somehow in my mind, it was justifiable that a 4th grader would work in the fields, but a 2nd grader, that was just too much. I don't know why, but that just freaked me out. So, but my sisters had worked in the fields longer than I had, and I started working with them on Saturdays, and I thought it was fun. And then the next summer, I had to work as a job. But because I was a kid, I got paid 75 cents an hour, and the adults got paid $1.25 an hour. And, we would get sprayed with pesticides. The crop dusters would come, and when you hire a crop duster to spray the field, they spray the field because that's what they're paid to do. So if there's people in the field, they'll still spray it, and they did. So I just remember my mom saying, get down, and we would cover ourselves, and it would come down, and we'd have to wash our eyes out with water and put dirt on ourselves so it would absorb the pesticides. And I can just imagine, what that was like for my mom to see her kids putting dirt on themselves so that they wouldn't, the pesticides wouldn't absorb into their skin. So my dad worked with the fields with us, but then he eventually got a job at a meat packing plant and became a meat packer. And then he joined the union, and then we were slowly able to save money and work our way out of the fields. But by that time, my sisters had lied about their age, and so they were 16 when they were really 14 or 13, so they could get jobs outside of the field. And then it was me and my mom, and we cleaned houses and did all kinds of stuff. So I've been working since I was in the 2nd grade. That I just discovered. I always thought I was been working since I was in the 4th grade, but I'm working since I'm in the 2nd grade. But and I pushed those memories down so far that I eventually got a job as an adult working at a nonprofit organization that focused on migrant and seasonal farm workers. And I never told anybody that I was a farm worker because I'd forgotten. I'd pushed it down so far that it just didn't even occur to me. And I can look back now and see other farm worker kids in the hallway playing around, and I just wish that I would have stopped and told them that I see you, and it's going to be okay, and let me help you. But I was in my own denial about it, and the way I came to write about farm work is when I joined this group in Kansas City called the Latino Writers Collective. And there was a group at KU, and they were bringing farm worker kids from across the state, and they were letting them go to college for 3 weeks in the summer. They would learn how to pick their own classes, how to live with somebody who wasn't their brother or sister. They would be independent, and it was a really great thing for them. And so they asked us, would you come and tell them about poetry? And so the group we went over there, and the night before I thought, this is it. I didn't get to talk to those kids at my job, but I can talk to these kids. And I thought, I got to tell them the truth. I can't say, oh, it's going to get better, and you're doing this for your family, which is true, but they needed to hear that it's hard work and that it's wrong for your parents to make you work the fields. And so I did the one thing that you're not supposed to do. I talked bad about my mom. And when I got to that point, we all started crying because we all knew somebody just had to say it, that it wasn't fair that we hated our parents for making us do that, but then you strike out at the ones that you love the most because you know they can take it. So I have a poem that I wrote for those kids, and when we get to that point, I say that I never wanted to be as stupid as her, and then we all stop, and I can hear some sniffling and crying, and then I talk about how I was being selfish, and that I was just upset that the farmer was cheating us out of money, and then my mom shares her food with us because she didn't eat it for lunch that day, and she gives me a smile, and that's like her apology, and I give her one back as an apology for being so awful, as a kid. And so I read that poem to those kids, and I realized they need to hear this. More people need to hear this. I need to write more about this because it helps me get it out of my system, and it helps me connect with other people. And then that thread has led us all the way to here, to where we're here talking and telling our stories and the truth about it. And in this piece I wrote, I read something bad about my mom, and it still kills me to read that. But that was my sister's experience, and I can't say, no, I'm not going to put it in the poem because I don't like you talking bad about mom. That was her reality. My mom was 14 when she got married and had kids, and so by the time she was 23, she had 4 kids, and we were working the field. So I can't really blame my mom, but I just wish we had the resources and we knew better. And that's why organizations like Patricia that she's with, it's going to help a lot of people, a lot of kids, a lot of women, and that takes pressure off men who have to feel like they have to be the macho and carry the household, when it's really the women who are the backbone of the house. And hopefully this helps lower domestic violence and child abuse, because when you get people who can express themselves and have a living wage and feel respected, then everybody benefits from that. And you can have a loving family. So I know I went on a lot.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you, Miguel. Julián, in your poem, The Weeds, there seems to be sort of an undercurrent of gratitude that I felt the speaker, the work is hard, the conditions are miserable, but the speaker is glad to be there with her aunt and her cousins. And is glad for the burritos, slow cooking on the dashboard, And it's something I really wanted to point out. All 3 of you in your pieces mentioned the bean burritos for lunch being the best part of the day, the lunches being the best part of the day. And it made me think about, I think that every piece in the issue does have those small moments of joy, maybe too strong a word, but, community, family, love, that light spot in a lot of hard work. And I was just wondering if you could talk more about that experience, either in your life or in your writing, or how that sort of comes through in your work. Do you want to start?
Okay, for me, and I've been thinking about this for the past couple of days. Right now, my partner and I live in Washington Heights, New York, and it's a very, populated by Dominicanos and Latinos in general. And I've been thinking a lot about just gathering and what comes of that from Latinos. And a lot of times, whether it be the fields or an event like a quinceañera or a wedding, whatever it is, no one's doing it alone. Everyone has a hand in the gathering, whether it ends up being a good one, a bad one. And needless to say, they all end up memorable, which I think is even more important. Like I said, I think our stories, the value behind them is endless. But yeah, like I said, it's just the gathering. I mean, whether it just means a lot, because like you said, joy may not be the word, but when you have a community, I mean, you'll find yourself going a lot further than you possibly ever could by yourself, Yeah,
I think, to me, you and I were talking about that earlier, about community and strength. And when I started wanting to write about my experience of my family as farm workers and getting into the American fold and becoming middle class, and what happens in between the Americanized children and their Mexican parents, and this separation that occurs is really hard on the parents to take. But for me, in particular, working in the fields, and when we do have the bodas and family gatherings, it reconnects you to your family, which is really good, because you need to remember that you love each other, as opposed to, I grew up feeling like my parents and my aunts and uncles eventually realized, okay, why is she losing her Spanish? She can't communicate with us the way she used to. And they felt like we were turning our back on our culture. And that was really hard for us to take. And they'd make fun of us for it. We talked about that too. My aunts would say, oh, you're a bocha, you're becoming too American. And we're like, well, that's what we're supposed to do. We live in this country, we're trying to be good students. And so we would dig in and fight against that, and not until you get older do you realize that. And I came to this idea after I read Amy Tan's Joy Luck Club when I was in college, and she addressed this too with the Chinese immigrants. What's happening is my aunts, my mom, they're feeling sad that they feel like they're losing us. And so when you realize that it's not anger, it's sadness, you can reach out more to your family. I think everyone goes through a period in their life, especially in middle school and high school, where you want to pull away from your parents anyway. And when there's a cultural separation, it's even worse. But I feel like it hasn't been addressed enough, so I'm glad we're doing this in the Latino community. It's a huge thing. And there's so many. So I'm from California. The latest statistics just came out. 31% of Californians, 12 million, identify as Mexican. Huge. And then there's Salvadorians, Ecuadorians. And if you look at California, there's not that much Latino literature coming out of there. So again, and thank you for giving the voices, because these are stories that people connect to and want to hear their stories. And I remember growing up thinking, and this really bothered my father, everyone thinks all Latinos are always just farm workers or factories, but that's not true. There's a lot of other things you do, but because there's always immigration coming in, there's always Latinos in the fields, everyone thinks that's all Latinos are, and that's not true either. And so I thought, my relatives, if you saw the way they lived when we were coming back and forth in Mexico, they had these beautiful lives. My aunts were so elegant, but they were in the fields, no one thought that. And so I want to say, so everyone has a different story coming over from another country, whether it's Mexico, and now it's a lot of Central America, Venezuela. I think you've heard of this, that they can be engineers, doctors, but when they come over here, that doesn't translate. So we need to be aware that when we're watching people working these jobs, they have inner lives, really rich inner lives that we don't know, and so we need to share those.
I want to share and emphasize that even though farm work is difficult and breaks your body and it can break your spirit, there are wonderful gifts that the fields give you. I've learned a work ethic that I never would have learned at any other job or any other experience. I've learned patience. I've learned persistence. I've learned a respect for women that I don't know as a Latino living in Texas I would have ever had unless I worked alongside women who helped me do my job, who covered for me when I didn't know how to hoe the weeds or cut the corn with the machete. They taught me so much. So, and then just to get ready in the morning and drive out to the field, and you put on your stuff, you get on your work gear on, and you look out and you get assigned your rows, and then the sun starts to come up. And, that is so beautiful to be there with people that you trust, because you have to trust them. And you see this miracle of the sun just rising, and it's your private moment. Like, no one else is in that field except the 5 of you. And you're witnessing this thing, and then you start walking and you work the rows, and the sun starts to slowly come up, and just for like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, it is just, you're working with God at that moment. And it's just so beautiful. And I've been to Hawaii, and I've seen sunsets, and I've seen sunrises, and they're beautiful, and they take my breath away. But right now I'm thinking back at the fields and just seeing the sun come up and the dew I hope it's dew, not chemicals, pesticides, but how it would just evaporate. And I'm just thinking what a beautiful moment that was to be there with my sisters and my mom and my tias, and just to share in that time. Because the rest of the time we were working, and it's chaotic. You got to get ready on time, and you got to get home, and then you got to shower and shave, and then start all over the next day. But for that, like I said, that 30 minutes, you were just there with God and your family. So yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. That's sort of what I was thinking of, what you had said earlier. I'm cognizant of how long we're going. I have 1,000 more questions, but does anyone have any questions that they want to ask our guests? No. Go ahead.
My wife and I are oral historians, and we have been doing lots of interviews in the Valley over the past year to celebrate the 350th memorial of both Deerfield and Northfield. And we live in Sunderland. And I love landscapes. And I think New England has all these beautiful landscapes. And the most beautiful thing about these landscapes are the people that are in them. And they aren't the people who go to Amherst College. And I think, who are those people? How could I talk to them? What would I talk about? Would I talk about how they snuck through customs, or how they... No. I would want to talk to them about their happy memories of where they come from and what they brought with them. What recipes they brought with them. What lullabies do they sing to their children at night? Who are they? They're a bigger part of the landscape of this valley than any other group of people you can see anywhere. And so my question is, how do you make a connection with the people in the field without getting them into trouble with the guy who owns the field and essentially owns them? And do you think that farm workers would want to be included in a community collection of stories? Because they are, at least for a few months of the year, they are a very important part of all these communities here. How could you approach it?
Well, I think if you want to support and know the farm worker community, you volunteer at organizations that already support them, and you get to know people. I mean, you can't just like, hi, this is who I am, because I don't know you. I don't know what you're here for. I don't know if you're with the government or you're some crazy person who's trying to, we don't know. We have to be protective of our community. So if you go through an organization that we already trust, then we see you, and then again, we see you again. And if we see that you're persistent and wanting to help, then we will engage with you and talk with you. But it's a matter of trust, and there's a lot of trust that needs to be rebuilt among the Latino community and the larger white community, especially when that power dynamic is you have power over my legal residence, whether I'm documented or not. You can still call, the INS on us and make it hard. So I would suggest getting involved with an organization that already exists and work with them. One of the first things that I read when I started thinking about a farm worker anthology or portfolio is there was a group up in Upper New York here. They put together an anthology. I think it took about 3 or 4 years because the community is so nomadic that they would come back every year and they would do writing workshops, and they eventually put out an anthology, and I think it came out like in 1985 or 1986. And it's out of print, but I found one on Amazon, and I treasure it. I love it. But the work, farm workers want to tell their story, and we tell our story to each other. We tell it through song and poetry that we say to each other in the fields. If we can kind of encourage each other to formalize that a little bit more, have some people maybe like us who are from farm worker communities come in and say, that's a great story. Do you want to explore it more? Let's do a lesson on how to organize your thoughts. Let's do a lesson on how to find the theme that's in each one of these stories that you're telling, you know, and not have them worry about their grammar or their spell. That's all mechanics. It's the story. If you can tell a story, then you have a poem, you have an essay, you have a book, you know. So I would say to work with people like us who have this background, but then also you have to support the local organizations that are already doing the work with farm workers.
Part of being an oral historian is finding and loving the poetry that you find in the way people come up.
Yeah.
You know, I work for this nonprofit literature organization, 916 Inc. in Sacramento, and we teach creative writing. And it's just a lot of the kids are Latino that I work with, and English isn't their first language, and there's not a lot of Latino writers. So when I come into the classroom, they're so happy to hear that I can speak Spanish with them, but also tell them that it's okay if you're not writing as well as you should, or you can't spell. Because I always tell them the best storyteller I knew was my grandmother, who couldn't read or write. She couldn't write in Spanish or read in Spanish either, not just English, but she was a phenomenal storyteller. And so, you know, I want them to know you have a story to tell. We'll get you to because I do believe you should, you know, become, you know, fluent in writing and in English and know how to put your words to paper, but that'll come. Just because you can't do it now, we'll get you there. And so we do that. But, you know, they do need, you know, and so at 916 Inc., I'm one of the few Latinas there, and the kids, you know, they need to feel like, I don't know what it is, they feel safer with someone that's familiar to them, even though there's so many great people who aren't Latino who want to help them. I see that with my coworkers. The kids just feel like, oh, I don't know, you know, should I trust them? So, you know, even though there's good intentions, which I believe there's a lot of good intentions, you need, like you said, this conduit of trying to get in there. But I think that's great that you even, you know, think about that.
I mean, the only thing I want to add to that, both of you guys elaborated on the issue, amazing. And it's just, you know, common ground. And that can happen in so many ways. And for Latinos, it's food, or it's song, like how we talked about, or storytelling. And, you know, I think Miguel, you know, hinted at this earlier when he read, and it's finding a way to realize that we have much more in common than we do, you know, differently. And sometimes that takes a little more work than it will with one person or the other, but you got to be able to put that work in. I mentor farm worker youth. Sometimes we do arts and crafts, but I always try and get us to do writing, and they don't want to do writing because they're afraid of that their words aren't the right words. And so we'll talk and we'll do bullet points and everything, and then they'll start writing and they'll be like, just tell me what you want me to write. Tell me, you know, like kids are, oh my God, just tell me. Then after like 20 minutes, and as they're still complaining, I don't know what to write, I'll start telling them about my story. Oh, this is what I used to do. Oh, one time I remember me and my sister, and then they'll start scribbling things down, and then I start telling a little bit more, and somebody will share a little bit, and then like after 30 minutes, I'm like, okay, we're gonna wrap up. One more minute, and they're writing, and it's just coming out of them. But they're so used to that in school, write the answer. This is right. So they're like, just tell me what you want me to write, because that's how it is with their schooling. But then when you give them the time to explore their story and you share your story with them, then they're like, oh, okay, I can trust you with my words and my thoughts. And whenever the instructor's there, they're like, how do you get these kids to write? They're like, they never want to write or talk or stand up and read their story. You got to just get past that uncomfortable first 15 minutes where it's frustrating for you and it's frustrating for them, but it's a test for both of you. Like, how seriously are you going to be invested in my story? And I'm going to push it until you crack, kid, because we're gonna connect. And sometimes it takes multiple sessions, and then they share. And then, you know, the first time I did it, it was like 15 or 16 years ago, and then you know, I got an invitation from one of my farm worker kids who was graduating. And I was like, wow, that is incredible, because they leave at the end of the season and I don't ever know if I'm going to see them again. And sometimes they come back and sometimes they don't. But this one kid came back every year and they're like, I'm graduating, and do you want to come to my, I'm like, I'm going to be here, but, but, you know, that's great.
That's great.
Thank you all so much for your beautiful answers, your beautiful thoughts, your beautiful readings. Thank you all for being here to hear them and to being open to everything we're talking about. And I also just want to tell everyone that the wine is going to disappear soon. So if you want another glass of wine, get it like right away because they're going to take it away. And please eat and visit and maybe buy some issues. And really, thank you so much for being here. This issue has been so many years in the making for Miguel and I mean, really for all of you, you know, a lifetime in the making. And I'm so glad that the Common could have even a little part of that.
I want it to be the best-selling issue they've ever produced.
I think
So
it might be
buy
on track
multiple
to be.
copies, give them out as presents, tell everybody you know, so that way we can send a message that these stories need to be told.
Thank you all. Great.